In this video, I'll be using PRYME flap wheels and the mini cleaning kit to remove the stock casting and casting lines off the linkage system and triple clamps on my RM250. What's going on, everyone? Greg Hitchko here and welcome back to the channel. And I'm super pumped to try out some new goodies that I just received from PRYME, including the flap wheels and the mini cleaning wheel kits. Right now I am currently knee deep in the middle of my throwback two-stroke garage build shootout, cleaning parts, making these parts look factory again, and the PRYME pads, cleaning wheels, and flap wheels are a huge component of that. So for those of you who are not new to the channel, you know that I'm a huge advocate for the buffing wheel and cleaning pads that PRYME sells. We got the coarse pad here and then the fine pad here. So the bigger cleaning wheels work great for the outside of parts where you're not getting into the nitty gritty in the insides and the corners here. So for this example, using the coarse pad to remove the casting lines on the outside of this linkage works great, but you're not going to be able to get the inside of the linkage because the pad is too big and won't allow you to get on the inside. So that's why we got some more options here. So first up, we got the 320 grit and the 80 grit flap wheels right here. So these are actually going to go on to the bench buffer. What's cool about these flap wheels, they're actually integrated with sandpaper as well, along with the Scotch-Brite type pad. So it just makes for cleaning these casting lines on linkage parts and the triple clamps much easier. So this is obviously the finer grit flap wheel, but the 80 grit flap wheel should really do some damage on these thick casting marks that you see on this linkage arm here. Where the smaller flap wheels will come in handy and the smaller cleaning wheels will be the tight inside corners of this linkage knuckle here, and again, where this big cleaning wheel over here is not able to get on the inside there. So that's why we've got the mini cleaning wheel. So we got the coarse pads here, and then we got the fine pads to finish up. If we take a closer look at this linkage arm, I don't know what happened here, but there's just like nasty gouges and scratches here. And if we look at this side of the arm, there's just some chunks out of there that might look like they're from the chain. And if we flip it over to the other side as well, there's some more nasty, gnarly scratches. And then also some deep gouges on the inside of this arm here. If we flip over to the knuckle as well, you can just see how beat up this knuckle is from the RM250. I think it was used for off-road use. And then also those casting lines and marks that you see on here are gonna be completely gone after we hit them with these flap wheel pads. So I forgot to mention, for these mini cleaning wheels and the mini flap wheels here, I have a die grinder set up for the compressor. And this little adapter came with the mini cleaning wheel kit. But basically you just take the adapter and push it through the mini cleaning wheel pads, throw it on the die grinder, and that should work great. Also, like normal, I've got my safety glasses ready to go for me, and then this respirator, because when you're grinding these parts down, the mini particles from the metal are flying in the air, and then also the mini particles from the flap wheels themselves will be flying in the air, and you definitely don't want to be breathing that in. So a couple tips before we get started here. You'll notice how I've cleaned the parts and there's no dirt or grease on these parts at all, and that's because you want these parts as clean as possible when you start using the PRYME wheels. What happens is, if they're dirty or greasy, that grease is going to get in the wheel and then kind of smear across the part itself. So definitely make sure the parts are clean. And then also for the technique, you'll see me buffing in the same direction. So once I start buffing in one direction, I don't switch it up. So I'm not gonna buff left and right and then kind of go up and down, because then it'll leave an uneven finish here on the part. So make sure you're always buffing in the same direction. And then also try to make it as even as possible too, because if you're buffing and just leaving the part here in one spot for a while, it will cause a dip or a low spot, which won't look good. And then also, based on the application, you just want to apply an even pressure as well. You don't want to be too light, because then it actually won't be working anymore. And then you also don't want to be applying too heavy a pressure, because that means, one, the pad will be wearing down way too fast, and you should probably switch up to a lower grit pad and have more of an aggressive wheel on the buffer. All right guys, but enough of me blabbering about these PRYME pads. Let's finally get to work. The one thing I did want to mention is I've linked all of the PRYME pads and the tools I use today in the description below, so you guys don't have to go hunting online. Makes it super easy for you if you are interested in getting some of these products and tools. And also, by purchasing through the PRYME link through the description below, it helps support me and the channel to keep pumping out cool videos like this, so I greatly appreciate it. Thanks guys, and let's get to work. All right, so I'm gonna start with this linkage arm first, and since these have got pretty big and thick casting lines on them, I'm gonna throw the 80 grit flap wheel onto the bench buffer, and then throw the 80 grit mini flap wheel onto the die grinder and get to work. Actually, just kidding. So I'm gonna do a little comparison actually. So I've got the single wheel coarse grit pad on here first. So I'm gonna try to get the casting line marks out with this wheel and then go ahead and throw the 80 grit wheel on afterwards and see which one works better. I kind of have an idea, but I'm gonna put these prime pads to the test. All right guys, so stopping here for a second, you see how the course pad did work to grind down this casting line? This is a pretty thick casting line, so it took me a little bit to get it ground down. So what I'm gonna do now is flip over to this 320 grit flap wheel pad, throw this on and see how that compares to just a standard coarse grit pad. So an update on the 320 flap wheel pad. It actually looks like the course pad, the single course pad, works better to get these casting lines off, because as you can see here, I was pressing pretty good with the 320 flap wheel and the casting line is still on there, and I was fighting it a little bit harder than I should have. So let's go ahead and throw that 80 grit flap wheel on there. All right, so with this thing on there, I'm definitely expecting a better and quicker result to get this casting line off. All right guys, so coming back at you, I actually think that course pad did the best job. As you can see, there's still that casting line on here compared to this job where the course pad was. So I spent about the same amount of time with the 80 grit flap wheel as I did with the course single pad, and I think for these thicker casting lines that we have on this linkage arm, that single course wheel pad is just able to penetrate much better. So I'm actually gonna throw that back on to finish up these thick casting lines. I think these thicker flap wheel pads are gonna come into play with smaller casting lines like this that we see on the triple clamp here, and to remove just the general casting in general, I think that's gonna work great. But for the thicker lines that we have on the linkage arm, the trusty single course pad is the one to go with. And just right off the bat there, I just finished up that last section on this side of the linkage arm, and you can see how much easier that single course grit pad worked to just clean that casting line right up. And I wanted to show you guys this too, how I removed the casting line at the end as well. Here you see what it looks like stock. Here you see what it looks like after the casting line removed, and just, man, how much better does that look, and why would you not want that for your parts on your bike? So for the sake of the video, I've got the 80 grit flap wheel back on, and then you guys can see how there's scratches at the end of the linkage here that I think the 80 grit flap wheel is gonna work great to take out. So let's give it a shot. So overall, I'm happy with the way the flap wheel worked and took those deeper scratches out. They were pretty deep, but we're gonna continue trucking on. So putting the buffer aside for a second, I'm gonna attack the inside of this link arm and these casting lines. And you guys can see the nasty gouge that's right there. So what I'm gonna do is actually start with this 80 grit prime wheel, and this actually fits in there perfectly. So I'm gonna throw it on the die grinder, test this one out first, and then I am gonna test out the coarse mini pad next. So let's compare both of these guys here on the inside of these casting lines. All right guys, so the medium mini flap wheel, I would call it, is doing an okay job on this inside casting line here. Taking me a little bit longer than I would want. It's also hard to get into this tight crevice here, and it's not small enough to get here on the inside. So what I'm gonna do is take that mini 80 grit flap wheel and see what kind of damage you can do in here. So that mini flap wheel did a way better job. You can see that this casting line is pretty much all gone here. The only problem is I'm having just in this corner here, there's a nice little gouge. So luckily I have a second die grinder that I'm gonna use with this rough coarse pad and see if that takes it out. And then I'm gonna see how that compares to just using a coarse pad like this on this other side, and I'll let you guys know which one works better. So here's a look at the finished job of getting all the casting marks off on the inside of this link arm. What I'm gonna do now to really shine it up, I am going to take the fine wheel and give it that nice, really shiny brushed look. All right, so that fine wheel touched it up nice. So now what I'm gonna do is take one of these mini fine wheels and just rub it across the whole part like this to make sure it's got an even, nice finish. And make sure we're rubbing it in the same direction, not up and down or swirly. This thing is gonna come out looking really nice. All right, so moving on to the triple clamp now, I'm gonna see how this 80 grit flap wheel works to get the small casting line off and just the stock casting in general. There you go, the 320 flap wheel definitely worked way better on this top triple clamp. You can see where I was working right here compared to the stock side that has that original cast finish and the casting line. The 80 grit flap wheel pad took that casting line right up. So it's still a smooth finish, but you can still kind of see some of the lines here from the roughness of the 80 grit pad. So I feel like throwing the 320 grit flap wheel pad on here should clean that right up. So let's give that a shot now. All right, so here's a better look at that triple clamp. You can see how on the right, that casting line is just completely removed there. So then on this side, what I'll do now is use the standard coarse grit and then fine wheel pads to see how it compares to the flap wheel side of things. This is the side I just finished up with the coarse wheel compared to the side I finished up with the flap wheel. I only did this section with the flap wheel, but it was able to go around the whole triple clamp here with the coarse wheel. Using that coarse wheel, it just gives a lot brighter finish. It's a lot smoother and it goes a lot faster. I'm not working as hard or as long with the single coarse wheel compared to the flap wheel. So still, so far, these coarse wheels are definitely the winner in my book. All right, so I threw the 80 grit flap wheel back on and kind of came at this top triple clamp from the opposite way, the long way instead of up and down. And the 80 grit flap wheel did seem to work much better, but then the problem is with that, then this very end piece here, I wasn't able to kind of get that last little bit on the triple clamp like I could have if it was straight up and down. It did work better this way, but not ideal. All right, so next up is this knuckle, and this thing is in really rough shape. You can see some gouges out of here. I don't even know how that happens. There's some like side to side scratches here, some more here at the tip, and just flipping it over. I don't even know what this is from, but this is really, really bad. So what I'm gonna try now actually is 2 coarse pads on the buffing wheel. So let's give it a shot. And these things are actually brand new. So I'm actually gonna go with this 2 coarse pad method because I'm actually not confident that the flap wheels are gonna do the job as quickly and as efficiently as I want them to do. So this is the first time doubling up some coarse pads. Let's let her rip. So here's the first pass at this knuckle with 2 coarse pads on there together. It didn't do a bad job, and what's nice about these coarse pads and instead of the flap wheels is that you can really use the edge of the coarse pad itself here, because with the flap wheels you need to keep it flat. So I found out with doubling up these 2 coarse pads, I felt like I needed to keep the part flatter on the wheel itself, where a lot of times I find myself using the corner or the edge of the wheel to really help and get those casting lines out. And to kind of get in these tighter spots here, the 2 pad method worked okay, but I think I'm just gonna switch back to the 1 pad coarse pad and then finish up this outside and then take the mini pads on this inside. So a little trick I wanted to show you guys is actually utilizing the side of the PRYME pads. So you can put the edges of the knuckle on the pad like this and it'll clean it up. And then you can also, for these tighter spots here, like this one edge, while the pad is spinning, you can use the side to help clean that up if it's kind of too tight to clean the part like this. We got a little situation going on. I thought we were gonna be able to get the miniest of cleaning pad inside here to get all into the crevices and make sure that's all polished up, but unfortunately, you can see that the mini wheel only gets so much and is in these tight corners here I'm not really able to get. So what I have here instead is a Dremel 3000, and I've got these little wire bit heads here that I'm gonna put in here, and these things should be able to get into those cracks and crevices without a problem. So let's give that a shot. So there's the final result of using the Dremel, really able to get in those tight corner spots here. I'll leave a link in my description below so you guys can get the Dremel and these little wire brush bits. They work great for those in-between tight spaces. So flipping it over, there's the other side. Again, just looking really good right there. All right, guys, so that is gonna be a wrap on reviewing Cameron DeMello's PRYME pads and flap wheels, showing you guys how to remove the casting lines off your linkage, arm, knuckle, and top triple clamp here. So at the end of this video, you guys should have a real good idea of what PRYME pads and flap wheels work on what whether it's the coarse pad, the 320 grit flap wheel, the 80 grit flap wheel, the mini wheel kit, the mini flap wheel kit. All of the tools that I use today, including the die grinders and Dremel, and even the mini wire brushes for the Dremel to get into the tight spots here of the knuckle. All those tools and pads will be linked down in the description below. Guys, if you click on these links and purchase tools and pads through those links, gives me a little kickback and really supports the channel to help me keep producing videos like this. But if you guys are really a fan of this video, make sure you punch that like button. Subscribe to the channel. I'm so stoked on how these PRYME pads work to make my parts look factory. And also, if you guys have any questions about the processes I used today, make sure you leave a comment below because I will definitely make sure that I will get back to you and respond to all comments and questions that you guys have. And I can't wait for what we got in store in future videos. So guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and we will see you in the next video. Peace.